We're talking about confidence, and before we hit record, we were just sort of saying how it's interesting how lots of people have confidence in particular contexts, but not other areas. So they might have confidence about being able to talk up to someone, walk up to someone that they sort of are attracted to, but then not have confidence to sort of put their hand up to sort of get into a role in the workplace. Or they might be in a situation where they've got understanding of or looking at someone else and going, wow, that person's confident, and then see all the things that they don't have in themselves. And it reminds me of working closely with a couple of ladies over my time. It's been interesting to sort of notice what is the difference in how they appear and the confidence they give. Those heels and the hair done properly is all required beforehand. Well, me personally, as long as I got a business shirt on and a set of trousers and a belt and shoes on, I'm feeling like I'm ready for business and ready to go with confidence wise. I shave, of course, and brush my hair in that scenario. But that's probably about the what I need to do to be able to get myself physically ready for confidence in most contexts. But still looking at how do you get that confidence? How can you look at other areas that you're confident in to see that, yeah, I do have that confidence. And when you know you have confidence in a context, whatever that context is, you can then bring it into a context you're feeling less confident in. What do you think about that, Alex?
Absolutely. I'm with you, Brad. And of course, confidence is different for everybody. So, what confidence is for me will be different to yourself and different for Shondell as well. And as we know, everybody shows up differently. And once again, it could be a lipstick, it could be a tie, it could be whatever it is for you. It could be something that you're a little unconscious of, and it could be something that you become conscious of now that we're bringing it up and having this conversation now. So I guess, and that's one thing. It's having the congruency within yourself and knowing that you know what you know and being able to step into your power and being able to utilize your skill set. Absolutely, it's all about how you present yourself and it's how you're seen as others. Yeah, and once again, I think I'm talking about congruency. Congruency is once again knowing what you know, but it's other people recognizing that in you, and of course that also builds you as an authority in the field. Shondell, I know you've had quite a lot of experience with this.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that's super important for our listeners is to just come back to what is confidence really. And I think that a confidence is an internal personal volition that you know that you know. And, often it's made up of a bunch of unconscious strategies, as you both said. And we often don't stop long enough to actually think, well, what's making up the confidence? And I remember a few years ago, I was teaching a 7-day practitioner training, and the morning got interrupted with a few different things, and I didn't have time to do my hair. And for those of you that don't know, my hair is naturally curly. And so, it takes me anywhere between sort of 30 minutes and an hour to blow wave it so that it looks like this. And I didn't have the time to do that. I wanted to keep my agreement about being on time to the training. And so I put in some product to enhance the curl, and I turned up to the training and I suddenly felt different, like I had left my resources behind. And I know this sounds a bit strange for those of you that might be listening, but the reality is I often don't wear my hair curly in a professional sense. It's something that I do on holidays. So when my hair is curly, I'm usually in a relaxed setting. And so it took a little bit of energy for me to actually put my focus into, hang on, I'm showing up with, a different set of resources. And that got me thinking a little bit about how people often have their confidence anchored in certain things. It might be how they dress. It might be how they show up. For some people, it might be, I know for you, Alex, putting on a pair of heels gives you a sense of feeling like you're ready to go. Brad, a suit jacket, a belt, a tie, and for me, obviously, having my hair ready, having a jacket, the heels work for me too. And I think that this is really important to bring into conscious awareness for you that might be listening. What are some of the things that are unconscious in your setup to get ready to start for action? Because if you know and you can identify what these things are from a conscious perspective, then you can start to emulate those little bits and pieces between each of the different contexts. And so, Alex, we were talking about this the other day in a project that we're doing where we identified some women who are in the on the pathway to leadership, and we noticed that perhaps maybe their confidence wasn't where it needed to be. Did you want to add something around that?
Absolutely. So, one thing that we happen to notice is that, we're looking at these ladies and they're confident in so many things that they do. And yet, when they need to step forward in their own personal life, they're empowered and they've got this, they're all over it. But as soon as they need to do it in the workspace, this is where they start to feel a little bit intimidated, and that self-talk is somewhat different. So it's interesting that they're so empowered and confident when it comes to everything else, and yet they're so good at what it is that they're doing, and some of them are so specialized in their area that they lack that inner conversation, and that internal representation is a little shaky once they step into the workspace, or for some people it's in front of groups. I've noticed is quite a pattern of behavior that we're seeing show up quite a lot of late. And it's interesting if people would just understand that that's a skill set and a strategy that they've developed, that is very unconscious to them. And it's very easy when they're working, of course, with a practitioner to be able to, or a coach to be able to come in and actually have those filters looked at, so we can look at what is the dialogue doing, where is it jamming, and what is it that we need to do to clean those filters, so that when they step into their work roles, that they're projecting exactly the same way as they do within their home space. So, Brad, have you got something that you'd like to add to this? I know you've worked around this a little bit.
Yeah, it's such a level of unconfidence, and often we'll be talking to leaders that have that imposter syndrome that comes up, and that's a classic case of where that lack of confidence is fostered into something when they're really doubting that they are in the role. They think any minute now someone's going to tap you on the shoulder. I'm going, oh, it's just a joke. You're not really meant to be here. Back to where you came from, So there's a constant sort of process, and they're often against this level of feeling inadequate and a lack of confidence. However, it's so much about a mindset. You can create that confidence in a moment by doing something. And I think also it's about being able to take stock and actually think about what you're good at, and being okay to own it. There are some times where in certain societies, in certain concepts, in certain areas where it's not good to sort of gloat and carry on what you're good at. And I kind of agree. You don't want to be gloating, but knowing what you're good at and being okay to know what you're good at will give you some confidence, because you're often just second guessing yourself. And a quick little story from about this is quite a while back, I got headhunted by a trainer who wanted me to do some training for them. And I was going through the interview process. I thought, oh, let's check it out. I can't say no. I've got to say yes. And what they did is that the night before a presentation, they gave you the content for that presentation, which you had to learn, put together, slides, everything from scratch, and you had to deliver it next thing in the morning to the entire team, including the CEO. And I'm like, okay, that's all right. So anyway, I've looked at it. I've got nothing to lose. I got everything to gain. I didn't need the job. I didn't necessarily want the job. I was going through that process of going, okay, so someone wants me. What did I feel? Automatically, I felt confidence because I'm needed and I wanted, and that was external. Going through the whole thing, deliver the presentation. And at the end of it, the CEO said, Brad, that's probably one of the best presentations I've seen anyone do. You've done a really good job on that. That was just fantastic. And I automatically went to, but this and that. And she stopped me right there. She said, stop. And then she swore at me and she said, take the compliment. When you're good at something and you own it, take the compliment. And then what it is, it stopped me in that moment, because it was a rather significant pattern interrupt. I was in a mindset, and here's this female CEO swearing at me and telling me to take the compliment. It snapped me out of it. I'm like, yeah, I am good at this. This is what I do. Lots of things I'm not good at, and I know what I'm not good at, but it's okay to own that. And my level of confidence when it came to putting into presentation and talking to people just went from, an unconscious level was probably around about here, but consciously it went from here to here just by going, you know what? I'm good at this. I can do it. I'm not good at everything, but this thing I'm good at. And as a flow and effect, the beliefs and the thoughts and the concepts I went through, and needed an external trigger, her saying it, to get going. But I realized in other areas that you can just own it. When you own it, you can own it and just go through and do the process. So that was a good learning for me, is understanding, okay, becoming consciously aware of the confidence you have in an area, what you're good at, and then being able to say, you know what, I'm okay at this, I'm good at this, I'm confident in that, and building that thinking and what that feels like. What's the self-talk that goes with that? How do you turn up and how you move with that?
think that's a really important point that I just want to pick up on there when you were talking about that rehearsal. And I think it's, bringing the unconscious conscious. So some people just naturally feel confident and that they can step up to do something, much like what you said when you shared the example of like, okay, I've got the material, I need to put together a presentation. That's fine. I can do all of that. And obviously that's something that you've done many times over. And I often say that confidence is built by small actions being completed and repeated over time. And so first and foremost, we have to develop the foundation and the strategy of, well, what does confidence look like to me, and how does it sound and how does it feel, which you kind of alluded to there. So, is it a stature? Do I stand a certain way when I feel confident? Is it, that I have a certain facial expression? Am I looking a certain way, whether that's an external look, or how does it feel internally to, be standing, or what's the emotion that I'm feeling when I'm feeling confident? And all of those things are sort of like the platform or the framework. And then it's the action of the repetition, which actually builds that muscle. And it's kind of like, I think a lot of people put labels on confidence. They either say you're either a confident person or you're not. And it is something that can be built over time. I often liken it to the idea of going to a gym. If I've never lifted weights in my life and I go and try and bench press 100 kilos, I'm probably not going to go so well if I do that. But if I was to build a plan and gradually increase that weight over time through repetition, then I probably find that my strength would build and build, and I could get to that point where I could do that. So I think that's a really important thing to discuss when it comes to, the way we coach ourselves to be confident, but also in the context of teams, because we often hear leaders say to us, I just know that this person is so capable, but they've got the itty bitty shitty committee and they're not confident. I mean, we see that all the time, right, guys?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it was a little while back, I was working with a leader and said, this person's doing really good. And she said to me, how can I help her improve her confidence? She just really, really has, not a lot of confidence. You can do the role well. And it was exactly that. Just pick up on what she's doing and reinforce what she's doing is really, really good. And then I got a chance to meet the person. And afterwards we had the session and she said, what did you think of that person? I said, I can see how you see a lack of confidence, because she's very slow to put forward, and she does project a lot of lack of confidence, and there's a lot more going on just in her skill set here. So we need to really start working on what's her internal thought process. What is she saying to herself? How is she beating herself up? How is she listening to the itty bitty shitty committee? Has she got lifetime membership to the self beaters club? And does she need to resign that? And going through and getting clear on that. So on that path now, it's about going to be going through and working with the leader and with that person to be able to go, all right, so what can you do this week that's going to prove and show that you've got that confidence? And she works in a place where she's dealing with customers. So not being able to come across confident on the phone or with a customer, and if other people are seeing a lack of confidence, it's not just their projection, it's based on what she does. This is going to really affect her career, because she's not going to be able to have difficult conversations. People aren't necessarily going to take her seriously, or maybe not sort of push her when she needs to be pushed, because they're a little bit worried about how she reacts. So interestingly, how the concept of what you think you are and what other people in confidence is there. And I think as a leader, we often, you've heard the saying, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And often we don't spend time we look at our people in our team who are problems are causing issues, as opposed to where we can get growth. We're putting out fires as opposed to building resilience. We're scared of having difficult conversations because we're worried about someone leaving or being upset because we don't have the confidence to do it, or they don't have the confidence. I think we need to realize that we need to have a moment of being able to develop the skill in other people by pointing out when they do something well and building their confidence, which in turn builds our confidence, because we're seeing what's done well and we're noticing that as well, which has an effect on us.
Yeah, I love that you say that, Brad, because there's no failure, there's only feedback, and that's one of the presuppositions of NLP. And without the feedback, how do you know how well that you're doing? And as leaders, where they sit, sometimes that's where it lacks a little. How much feedback are they actually giving their team? When they're doing things really well, are they acknowledging them? And when they're doing things not so well, are they quick quick to jump in. So, and obviously, that's their role, is to help develop leaders in and around them as well, and bring everybody up around them. But the thing is, how much feedback are you actually giving someone, and are you instilling confidence in that person? So is the feedback effective? Are you effectively giving it to them, as we call it in a feedback sandwich, where you're giving them a compliment about something that they're doing well to keep their confidence level high, or to feel like that they can have a conversation with you and be comfortable? Give them the constructive feedback, and help them install a new strategy, and then of course making sure that they understand that strategy moving forward, so that it can help them with their confidence. And as we know, there's no unresourceful people, but there are unresourceful states. And when people feel stuck, or they're not sure about something, and they're not getting that feedback from the authority and people around them, then that's sometimes when people tend to freeze. And that's when procrastination can set in. And if you're a leader and you're checking in with your team and people are not getting things done, or things are taking longer, then that's feedback for you, that there's an element there where maybe there's a little bit of procrastination, and that's feedback for you that you need to spend a little bit more time developing that team member. Shonda, you've had a lot of experience in this field, haven't you?
Yeah, and one of the things I want to pick up on what you said there, Alex, is how much feedback are you giving? And also, in addition to that, how much are you eliciting from the person who might be lacking the confidence? Because you and I had a situation where we were sitting with a client and we said, well, how would you know that you were confident? Like, what would need to happen in order for you to know that you felt confident? And that gave the person's internal strategy. In many cases, people can't answer that question. It takes deep thought. It takes, a process of being able to liken that to something else where we might feel confident. And I think it's about, when you're a leader that's attempting to assist someone with replacing their insecurity to their security and their confidence within themselves to do a task or to stand up and perform, we need to meet people where they're at. I think a lot of the time we start by going, okay, well, here's where you need to be, and just get yourself there. As opposed to, if we're a leader, we say, well, what is the present state, and how is it possible that this person doesn't yet understand or doesn't yet connect with the idea that they have everything within them to be able to be confident and to step up and to do this? And so often as a leader, as a coach, the challenge that we're faced with is being able to figure out, well, where is the present state, and where does the person need to be by their own measure of internal confidence that then can be validated with external feedback, and how do we bridge that gap for them? Brad, I know that this was something that you and I were discussing with one of our leadership clients recently. Like, what's your thoughts for everyone?
Yeah, recent as last week, we were working with a leader who's running a department, very effective, and would be referred to as running a very tight ship. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that he doesn't need to be at work till 8 o'clock, at 8 o'clock in the morning, and he can leave at 5:30, but he's there at 6:30 and leaves at 7:30 every day. And he is very, very running a tight ship. And the whole thing was that everything has to go through him, by him. He's in charge of everything because he doesn't like surprises. This was a theme that came up a number of times. And we ended up finding out that there was this belief of, I don't like surprises, that actually come from a situation in his personal life, and he'd mapped that across into work life and generalize it into everything. So here is someone who's running a really tight ship, a very successful business, but now it's actually a liability because he's not building the confidence in the team that they can make decisions without him. And it's fine to be aware of everything and making sure everything's going along right. But if you are the bottleneck, then what you're effectively doing is you're creating a bottleneck for the rest of the team to have confidence in what they need to do and being able to get those tasks, and also being able to create that space where people can make mistakes that hopefully aren't too costly, that they'll learn from, which will improve their confidence, because you learn from those mistakes and improves that confidence so much more.
And I think that builds that psych safety as well. I think when people have permission to take action because they know they've got the backing of their leaders, that creates an environment where they feel entrusted and they can take an action, be successful with it, get the feedback, and then, build that resilience over time. As I often say, repetition's the master of skill. And often if there's been one attempt to delegate, which looked more like abdication, the person doesn't succeed. And then the leader takes back the task thinking, well, that person's not confident to do it. So until they get confident, then, I'll need to step in and do that. And what that leads to for the person who the task is being taken off is a sense of a lack of confidence. And we're almost perpetuating the itty bitty shitty committee or the fraudulent committee, or as you called it, Brad, before, the imposter syndrome. It gets greater and greater. So
all right, so let's talk about when you have that scenario where confidence might be having an effect in your sales. Now, having done sales training for many, many years and helping people in sales and working with people who don't necessarily see themselves as salespeople, originally, my first experience of doing this was in a retail business where I'm teaching dive instructors how to sell, and they didn't think that they needed to sell, and they didn't know how they could sell. And fact of the matter is, in that scenario, you automatically create a space of authority. All right, this person's trusting your life to take them under the water, so you have an ability where you've got a level of authority there, which can be done obviously ethically, in a way where you can empower people to make the right decisions of what they're doing. And often what happens is situations where people would really lack the level of confidence because of a fear of the no, fear of what people would think about them. At that point, we talk about asking for the sale. The technical term for this in sales is the close, going for the close. And people can do all the great things, build a great relationship, all that sort of stuff up, but they won't actually ask for the sale. And that generally comes back down to a lack of confidence in being and knowing how to do it. And it comes back down to what are they going to fear of that rejection, and not being able to handle the objections. Or better still, they actually go through the process of building up the confidence, generally because they feel that they have to. So there is a strong motivation away from doing this sale. And that would be the case of business owners and coaches and things like that, where they know they have to make this sale. So they're forced beyond the comfort zone to do it. But then they get that rejection and they go, oh, so what do you think about that? No, I'll do it later. Oh, okay, bye. And they're so happy they got that objection to get out of there that they don't have the confidence to go, well, I've done this great conversation. I've had this fantastic conversation with you, and I know my product or service is going to work well here. How is it possible you do not have that? And all of a sudden, it all goes pear-shaped from there. So overcoming those objections is needing a confidence. It's about knowing where you need to go. And sometimes we're so far short in our thinking of where we are going, we can't see any further than just the very next step. And we get to that step, we're going, okay, so now we're here. What's the next thing we do? So it's really important to have an understanding of where is the final step. And Shondell, you've had some great experience in explaining this to people, and it's something that you've used yourself personally, and we've seen it make a big difference where people need to go beyond the next step. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, one of the most important things about closing that I want to mention for everybody is that a close doesn't always just happen at the end of a sale. I think if you know your sales steps, if you know that you have a system, and usually there's an engagement process, often we refer to Seth Godin's coffee to marriage principle. You don't meet someone in a bar and propose marriage on the first date. Usually there's a series of, relationship steps and, a certain amount of courtship and interactions and things like that. And so sometimes if people don't have their sales steps set out really well, it can be a little bit like proposing marriage on the first date. And so when you know your sales steps, the close is actually, closing into the next action. So let's say, for example, you get an inquiry or an inbound lead. The first step is to close the first conversation. The next step might be to close, the appointment, and the next action to put together a proposal, et cetera, et cetera. But I think what you might have been referring to was my ability to jump the worry wall. And there's a little bit of background to this really, really quickly, is that my grandmother used to have this saying where she'd say, anytime I was going in to do something important, she'd say, make sure you walk in with the right foot. And it was really interesting because I found myself sometimes literally crossing the threshold of a doorway with my right foot because it changed a perception in my mindset. And then I started to apply this to things that I had a little bit of itty bitty shitty committee on. So my first career in sales, in business to business sales, was actually, I was required to make 150 cold calls a day to get 10 appointments the following day. And so, it takes grit, it takes resilience. There's lots of knockbacks, people hanging up the phone, potentially swearing at you, yelling at you, calling you names, etc. And so often I would find that if I'd had 4 or 5 or 6 calls where I'd received, hang-ups or people being rude to me on the phone, I would feel like I needed to reset a little bit. And so I had this process where I would imagine past the successful completion of the thing that I was doing. And so my strategy was that as I dialed the number to call somebody, I would imagine myself hanging up the phone, having a successful phone call and putting the appointment into my calendar. And that helped me to have the confidence to be in a better position to actually make the phone call. And I think that there are lots of things that impact our confidence when it comes to the sales process and the ability to handle rejection or objections, as often people will associate the two as being the same. I think it's also important to think about our body language and how we are setting ourselves up for success as well. So, Alex, I know that the mind-body connection is something that we talk about in the context of business and confidence and all of those sorts of things. Like, what are your thoughts on the process of actually using our body to improve our confidence?
Absolutely. Well, Shondell, as we know, your physiology is really important. So, what is your physiology? How is it represented? What is your state? What is your internal representation? What's going on in your mind? So all of these things are going to set you up. And I love the fact that you talked about the outcome, focusing on the desired outcome as opposed to going in, being stressed out and nervous about taking the call. It's like you're already conceiving the outcome. And that's really, really important that you stay focused on the outcome. It's one thing to know your product. It's one thing to know your service. It's one thing to be really confident in being able to sell it to somebody. But number one, what are the questions that you're asking? Are you selling the product because it's a great product? So it's a great product to you, but what is a great product to them? What are the key questions? What are you asking, the clients? And of course, Brad, I love that you actually mention people are so afraid to ask for the sale at the end, and I know that I've had quite a career in sales, and for me it was always just assuming the sale at the end, and opening up the space for them to actually come in and ask a question if they weren't comfortable with it. And that's how, of course, I would fish out an objection. And you won't know the objections if you don't ask for the sale. Yeah. And when I'm talking sale, I'm not talking product, for products or anything like that. I'm talking, what is the sale? Are you, is it a deal that you're actually, getting agreement on? Is it agreement in terms of something within the workspace? Like, what is it for you that you're actually trying to achieve? What is the outcome that you're focusing on? And, I just think it's really, really important. And, I know we've spoken to people in the law space and the building industry, and it doesn't matter where people are from. The same thing shows up every time, whether it's putting their hand up and stepping forward for a project or what that may be. So when we talk sale, we're not necessarily saying, products for money. We're not talking that type of service. We're talking any type of service. And once again, if you're not asking, for the sale, then there's, if you give them your spiel and then you get really uncomfortable. And one term or a metaphor I like to use is, it's like doing the tango without being dipped at the end. I don't want to dance with you and do the tango if you're not going to dip me at the end, because, that's the moment right there. And, how good does it feel when you've actually gone in with an outcome in mind and you've been able to pull that off, and that you've delivered excellence, you've over-delivered in value. And I know that's one thing that with both yourself and Shondell working in training rooms for many years, it's knowing that we need to over-deliver on that value so that we can already assume the sale, so we're confident moving in. But the most important thing is, what is that value to the person that you're speaking to? And I think that's probably one of the most important things to ask yourself. Am I asking the right questions? And the great thing is, it's always feedback. So when you're asking or you're assuming a sale, if there's an objection there, they'll come back to you with that objection, and that's information for you, so you know where it is that you still need to hit the mark in terms of value.
I love that metaphor of the tango. Like that's awesome. It's like the crescendo. It's like singing the song, but not doing the crescendo at the end, I think that's awesome. Sorry, Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember last week, the last couple of weeks, you've been doing with one of our clients, actually doing a discovery call with them as a client for them to give them feedback. And the feedback we had from the client was overwhelmingly phenomenal as what they learned out of that, because so much of them would stop them from going to the next stage. So if you were to go ahead, or not even assuming the sale, and your feedback to them when it came back through as far as what they got out of those calls was phenomenal, because they are so unconscious with what they're doing. It's so much a thing that they've probably heard someone else do, and changing that thinking to, okay, in the case of this particular firm working in family law, it's about seeing the end result of that matter coming to full and everyone happy moving on. Is that place that they need to be talking about with the client and future pacing going through that process and assuming that sale. I think everyone of that team all had phenomenal feedback about just assume the sale, and something they never even kind of thought about because they're already creating the objection with their lack of confidence in moving forward the next step. They're already creating the objection that they're putting out there that they don't necessarily have the answers for the client in that scenario. And again, then these are well skilled and really, really good at their role, and they do a phenomenal job. And this particular firm are really, really passionate about being different and being personal and looking after and serving people in a vulnerable, difficult time. However, by them not being able to assume that they are the best firm for them and they can move forward, they were getting some sort of pushback. So just sort of going through to a specific example of where that works for you in that context.
I just want to chime in on that actually, because I think that a lot of the time when people are in professional services, and as you know, at Life Puzzle, we tend to work with people who are technically brilliant, but not necessarily sales professionals as such, and it's building those skills. And I think that there's something really important about what you just said in terms of assuming the sale. And people make assumptions all the time about whether or not it's okay to ask for the sale. There's lots of connotations around sales being manipulative or, forcing people to do things that they don't want to do, which as you and I know, all of us know, that's nothing about what sales is. Sales is about being able to match value with needs. It's about being able to offer solutions. It's about being able to deliver value, etc., as we all said before. But you know what I think is really interesting is that a lot of the time people will not ask. And I always say that if you don't ask, then the answer is always no. Whereas if you ask, then the worst thing that could happen might be no, thank you, not today. But at least you know that you've done everything that you can, which includes asking for the sale. And this brings me to, a little example that I'd like to share around this is that a lot of the time when people are doing sales or that they're resigned to the fact that they have to do sales and they force themselves to ask a question without confidence present, what will generally happen is they will get a no because there's all these unconscious receptors that are coming up from the prospect, something. And this relates, I'm going to speak about my grandmother again, because she used to say that incongruence, and she didn't know the word incongruence as a migrant woman from Portugal. She used to just say, there's something about their eyes that doesn't match what their mouth says, right? And so that was her way of describing incongruence. And what was really interesting is that, she was right, that often when people are resigned to the fact that they have to do sales, but they're not comfortable or confident within, then they might ask for the sale with an incongruent manner. And then that leads to an objection or it leads to a no. And the next part of this is that often people will take the no personally. So they think that people are saying no to them or that they're not good enough, or they make all these assumptions about judgments on themselves that then prevents them from building the confidence to ask again. And so one of my favorite sayings is that objection is not rejection. It's just a cry for information. And I think that if we change the process of seeing an objection from somebody, whether it's in the context of selling a product or service, or whether it's in the context of selling an idea with your team internally from a leadership perspective or a coaching perspective, an objection is not a rejection. It's simply a cry for information. So the question I like to encourage my clients to ask of themselves is, what is it that I haven't said yet that helps this person to understand where I'm coming from? So Brad, what's your thoughts on that? Because I know this is a topic we discuss often.
Yeah, it's so often the case where people are not really thinking about it from their point of view. And sometimes I'll say to people, like, you believe in your product and service. Yeah, it's really good. I said, well, how can you sleep at night not doing your best to get this in people's hands? Because if it's that good, then you need to make sure you get that message across. And I've heard many examples of people where their product or service could have saved them in a situation, but they didn't do it, and then come back and regret it and found out later on. And that salesperson actually felt bad. They didn't do better to get the product or service for that person, to being able to help them. So much of what we need to be able to overcome is our internal objection and being able to get clear on that. And there's only 4 objections to any sale. There's only 4 objections when it comes into leadership as well, as far as getting that pushback. And if you know what those 4 objections are and you'll be able to address them and handle them in the conversation, then you're alluding to them and addressing them and making sure you overcome them. So there's less likely. I need to think about it. Is another scenario where that person has, they don't have an objection, but they're not ready to go ahead there. So there's some feedback for you on what you need to do. So you've got to be able to know at what point do you understand that you're pushing for an objection to educate and to give that information, as opposed to pushing the person against the sale and being pushy. And there's a fine line, and it's very easy to sort of dance that line when you're able to realize that your intention is to look after this person with your product or service. Your intention in leadership is to be able to get this person to get to the outcome they want, so that the business and the department, the KPIs, the activities are met, customers are happy, whatever it is. As long as that intention is shown and being clear, then it's okay to ask those deeper questions and push a little bit harder.
So, guys, one of the interesting things that happened was we had some of our followers on socials reach out to us and asked a really interesting question around the process of consciously increasing revenue through, sales systems, and was asking for some advice. So we thought what we might do is just give some rapid fire suggestions around, ways that we've seen, our clients and, within our own business, the process of increasing revenue in a short period of time. So what's your thoughts, guys?
I think that probably the first thing that is worth doing is improving your activity. The amount of times I'll be talking to somebody and business owners or salespeople, and I'll just ask them what's their activity of daily activity, what they're doing. And it'll be like, 5 outbound phone calls a week, like 5 outbound phone calls a week. So that's 5 connected. Yeah, 5 connected outbound calls a week. All right. So how many calls do you make to get 5? Oh, probably 10 or 15. All right. So, and out of those 5 calls, how many do you close? I said, 1 or 2 will sort of be moving on to the next stage. I said, all right. So we upped it to 10 actively connected calls a week, or even 5 connected calls a day. How long would that take you to get prepared for those 5 connected calls a day? And they give you an answer. All right. So show me your diary. What do you mean show me your diary? So, share the screen, show me your diary. Where's your diary? Let's look at this. Where is it you're so busy that you don't actually have time to be proactively making 5 phone calls a day? And all of a sudden we'd see a revenue jump significantly at the end of that week. And I go, wasn't that hard, was it?
Yeah, and I think for me, one thing that I, off the back of that, Brad, is the importance of measuring the activity as well. So get conscious. I remember reading an article that if you want to increase your sales activity by 20%, all you need to do is measure. So measuring that activity and the effectiveness of it. What about you?
We say that, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
What gets measured gets done.
That's exactly.
It certainly does. And I guess, speaking about what is the measurement, it's being clear with your teams. It's like, what is the outcome? Where are we headed? What is it we're looking to achieve? What is the goal and how are we going to get there? And it's people learning how to actually break it down to work out what's really, really important. And I know that's something that we certainly look at doing week by week, whether it be week by week, and it's broken down into our days, so we make sure that we're hitting those key points and those marks every day, which is contributing to the goal at the end of the week. And sometimes I feel like we just get so busy being busy, we turn up to work and we're flat out, and then we go home and we think, oh, that was exhausting, then the next day flat out. And I think, Brad, that's one of the things you just spoke about before, is getting clear on what does your day look like and how are you spending your time. It's imperative. It's important for the success. And, once again, it comes back to feeling congruent, having the confidence. It's aligning your teams. Are we aligned? Are we all heading in the same direction? What are we looking to achieve? And it's being clear. And I feel like clarity is one of the most important things in terms of being able to hit a goal as a team and individually, of course.
Yeah. I think chunking down the milestones, and also once you've done that, what the next step of the sales process is. So if I'm, making those calls, doing that activity, what's the next measure of success in the sales journey that I need? And I think it's really important that you begin with the end in mind, work backwards and create those milestones. So we've seen that work.
Yeah, I think probably another big thing I think that makes a big difference is just that 15 minutes at the start of the day to get planning on when you're going to be doing this activity and making sure it happens. So effectively, we refer to this as a big rock, and there's a story that goes behind that. Those that don't know, hang around and you'll hear about it sooner or later. But the idea of actually, and recently we've just put through a whole bunch of middle management leaders through it, and the feedback from the live call that we did in the leadership program was just identifying that big rock and making sure that they're putting time on those important things and scheduling those important things first. And those important things are the thing that's moving the needle towards that result. And it wasn't just in sales, and it was in other departments as well, but they're getting very clear on what was the most important thing they need to do that day. And that 15 minutes at the start of the day to plan and put into place the start and finish. What is the definition of good, done, and by when? So I know what is good, what is done, and when is this going to be done in that day. So therefore, I'm making sure that productivity I'm doing, that thing that's going to move that needle towards that sales, is going to be really good. Now, it might not necessarily be calling prospective clients. It could be calling past clients and touching base with them. And we've seen this happen as well, where people have been, by making that time when maybe the funnel's a bit quiet, they'll go through, or maybe they're a little bit down on their confidence and they're feeling a little bit beaten down by not being able to get any connected new business. They'll just go back and call past clients and check in and see how they're going as a get to, and hear how that client's enjoying their product or service, and that builds up their confidence to go in there again and keep going. So it can even be not necessarily a sales activity of new business. It can be looking at what you're existing doing, but get clear on what is the big thing you need to do that day. Schedule it, get it clear, make it happen.
Well, actually, Brad, you and I did a presentation in the recruitment sector, actually, and we had a couple of things in terms of increasing confidence. Particularly, we know that sector is experiencing the need for more outbound activity, that inbound inquiries slowed down. And one of the things that we were talking about was that sometimes when you're doing all of that outbound activity, or you need to set up to do that, you're not prepared, and you're not in the right headspace. And one of the things that resonated really significantly for a couple of the people that were on the program was, I suggested that when I was in those spaces where I was having to do a lot of cold calls, etc., if I'd had quite a few that were negative, I'd call a current client and thank them for their custom over the last 12 months. And so that put this headspace into a totally different energy, because you're having the conversation around the great things you've been able to achieve together, the conversation about a gratitude, and it puts the state in a different state, which then sets you up for confidence to have that next step. So I think that one of the things that we've articulated here is that there are lots of different things that you can do that can improve your results over a period of a quarter. And they're not just related to, one thing or another. It's almost like a multi-tiered strategy. And if I could add one more thing to that, I think also having a robust pipeline of opportunities is really important. I think sometimes what can happen, particularly for people who don't traditionally consider themselves to be salespeople, what can happen is they might have a pipeline of 5 or 10 prospects that they're working on. And when one actually drops out and it's a no, that can leave you with not as many opportunities. So we get a scarcity mindset based on, oh my God, I've only got 9 more opportunities that I can close. And, then the desperation selling, or what I've heard to referred as the credit card breath, can come out sometimes. So we want to make sure that there isn't desperation selling. And if you've got, 50 people that you're nurturing within a pipeline compared to a 10, then there's not that I suppose, risk of potentially taking the no personally and having that affect other relationships.
And I think also being aware of your pipeline and where your leads are coming from and where opportunities are coming from. It's great to be able to, and again, this is a scenario we're working with a current client, had a significant amount of inquiries and leads coming in. So a lot of quantity. And as we started doing coaching with them and starting improving the conversation, we started discovering that there wasn't a lot of quality in this quantity. So getting clear on that. So what we can do, and then all of a sudden, of course, there's an algorithm update, there's something that takes place, and all of a sudden then there's no quantity and no quality. And as a result of that, they got clear. So sometimes I think it's important to, even within that time of looking at what else can I do apart from these leads coming in, where I'm working out the quality over the quantity, that we call it the window shoppers versus opportunity, prospects, and how they fit into that, getting clear on that, and also just spending some time looking at what you can do to generate your own leads. And Shondell and I have had quite interesting, I call robust conversations around this, because I've come from a strong background of lead generation and leads coming into a business, and Shondell is a hunter, and would much prefer to be in control of that and not have an algorithm ruin her day, which I think is a smart thing to do.
Well, I think there's a balance. It's about walking the middle ground, right, Brad? I think there's a place for everything, that's for sure. and I think that's interesting. It's an interesting point that you bring up in terms of there are different strategies. And if I can add something around this, is that I think sometimes the fact that there are so many different strategies that we can employ, and this comes back to a point that Alex made earlier around procrastination, around potentially being busy. There are so many different strategies that people can employ. And, we have a few that we like, but we're also flexible, that we understand what's the right strategy for the right time. And you can't do them all, because that means that if you try and be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to no one. But at the same time, you can't do too few that you're not doing enough activity that is going to get you the results. So I think it's about being able to focus and narrow the attention based on what works. You can only figure out what works for you if you're measuring and being consistent in your activity. And most importantly, the mindset and the belief and the physiology that you bring along to actually undertake those activities, whether it's yourself or with your team. Those things have to be aligned and in the process of being congruent. Otherwise, or they have to be aligned or congruent, so that you can absolutely undertake them with consistency and with outcomes.
So one of the things that, we've spoken about that constantly comes up with leaders in the leadership space is that, people are just excited and they're empowered and ready to get moving with whatever it is that they're doing. They operate from a physiology of excellence. And so they just have the assumption and assume that everybody around them will be in the same space. And we find that leaders find it a little bit difficult, because obviously there's a lot of people on their teams. We know that we all have different filters and filter information differently and have different ways of communicating. And we find that with leaders in that space are finding it really difficult to understand, I can successfully motivate one person in my team, but I'm finding it really hard to connect or get the motivation from others. And Brad, I know this is something that we've dealt with quite often of late in that space.
Yeah, and it comes back down to a couple of key points. And often what it ends up being is that they just don't have the ownership. They just don't have the investment I do. And it's fine when you're a business owner, you automatically have that investment and ready to go. But when you're not the business owner and you're head of department, your investment is the numbers and the feedback you're getting from pressure you're getting from your leaders to be able to go through and do that. So you are a bit of away from motivation, but you're invested in doing that there because you want to do a good job and want to run the team. And often what happens here is that there's talking to people about the things that they need to do. And they talk about, this is the thing you need, this is A, this is B, this is C, this is D, this needs to be done. It needs to be done for this reason, for the business, for the customer, blah, 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 blah. They go on this great big long rant, which is all 100% correct and is all absolutely right in what they should be saying. But what they don't do is have this person understand what's in it for them. All right. So we're talking about in a context of a department like, for example, administration department. All right. So they're not sort of they're a cost to the business. All right. They're not in a revenue making as such. Yeah. And in this particular business, the accounts department and the admin department they're one of their KPIs is to look at the invoices from competition that they get to be able to price match and to be able to be competitive in that scenario. And it's really important that when the team get a potential price, you would have done this if you've ever gone for shopping around for your power. They'll say, give me your latest invoice for your power supply so we can see what you're doing to be able to match it across. So it's a common business practice, all right? So they get this invoice, and of course, the admin person is not necessarily motivated to do it because that's just another task that they need to do. But of course, the salesperson wants this done so they can go back to the customer before the appointment they've made to go through and do that. So the admin person will go, what's going on here? We got this deadline. We've got to get this through. Yeah, but I've got all of these things to do and all this sort of stuff to do. And then we're going, okay, all right. And then as a result of this happening, what happens is the administration person is getting bombarded from the other department, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. They're getting frustrated, getting stressed. Now, if the administration leader had said, hey, probably the most important thing we need to do at this time of the day is make sure that we're turning these invoices around and cost comparisons out ASAP, because when we don't do it, we get a stressed salesperson breathing down my neck, breathing down your neck, and annoying us, and they try to push the priority out of that. So let's get ahead of that so we maintain being calm, collected, and we're not stressed. We're going through the process. Other things are important, but when it comes to this time of the day, for this time of the week, we need to make sure this is important so we don't have to put up with these salespeople, these dirty salespeople coming and asking us to do more hard work.
And I think that often what happens is they do associate people with the behaviors, right? So that creates a domino effect of animosity between the departments, us and them mentalities, and that can really influence in a negative way how people are collaborating within their teams. And I think one of the things that you said there was really important around like setting a framework. I think, you know, the meaning of the communication is the response you get. And this is one of the things we talk about in NLP. So if at first you communicate something and it's not getting the response that you would like, then to be flexible enough to go back and say, well, I wonder if there's a different way that I can explain this that would actually produce a different result, keeping in mind what's in it for the person, what is it that they will get out of that experience, but also how can we work collaboratively so that everybody gets their goals and that it's easy and effortless to get the outcome. I think that's really important.
Yeah. And the other example of that is in the context of motivating a sales team. Now, we know that generally in a high pressure sales environment, there's a fair amount of churn and burn. There's going to be a turnover of team in that space because, and we're talking, you know, we're talking people who are making 80 to 100 cold calls a day in this context, all right? So there's a level of churn and burn. And the idea is once the person's been there for a period of time and they've shown they can do that, then they're now ready to be moved into a leadership sort of role if they get to that time frame in that. But so often what happens is that the people are talking about the activity they need to do today. You've got to be prospecting, you've got to be cold calling, you've got to be booking appointments, you've got to getting these people doing their accounts, you got to get their accounts traded, you got to start getting them doing work. So these are all little outcomes. And then what'll happen is the sales manager or a leader will be talking to the salesperson about this outcome. Now let's face it, there is nothing motivating about picking up the phone and dialing numbers and talking to someone who doesn't know you. There is nothing that you can do that's motivating to do that. It takes willpower every time to do it. And that's the difference between what is going to make a salesperson last 2 days in that job versus 18 months is the willpower they're able to do it and the excitement and a bit of the crazy sort of, I won't psychoanalyze a salesperson's mindset being one, but that process of what needs to go through in doing that. However, when the leader sits down and goes, okay, so in 3 months' time, we've finished this quarter, we've finished this period of time. What is the commission that you want to be earning out of that? And they say that, all right, great, excellent. And what are you going to spend that on? What are you going to spend that money on? All right. And all of a sudden, the person lights up thinking about dreaming about the future, all these wonderful things. Oh, I might get an engagement ring from my girlfriend. I might buy a car. I might have money to go on a holiday. I might, whatever it is, it's towards a deposit on a house. All of a sudden, what's happened is that outcome, that result that they need to have, what they're spending the money on, not the money itself, because the money itself is not a motivation. It's what you can do with it that motivates you. All of a sudden, that translates back to dialing the numbers, all right, picking up the phone, because the emotional drive of what they're going to spend the money on is linked to that activity. And so often when we find that we've got sales leaders who will do that, like one guy wanted the Mercedes-Benz. So the sales leader went to a Mercedes-Benz dealership, got the brochure, put it in a frame on his desk, boom. And every time he'd sit there in productivity, he'd go low, he'd tap on the shoulder and just point to it. Can you see yourself in the car driving that thing? The guy, all right. So how do you talk to what's in it for them? And how do you talk to what's going to motivate people to get that activity up? And it's not about manipulating them. It's about getting their buy-in and helping them find the unconscious motivation, that emotional drive and the willpower, because emotional drive will trump willpower every time. And as we know, if you've read the book Atomic Habits, it takes 66 days to install a habit. All right. And that's willpower to do it consistently over that period of time. Work with the emotion and you get a much faster, more productive, consistent result if that emotional drive is there and driven to get the results.
And it is much more enjoyable as well. And I think, as we wrap up, this month's discussion, I think that one of the key things around that is that it doesn't always have to be a monetary motivation. Like for a lot of people, it's a different kind of impact. It could be, more around time. It could be more around, feeling a certain sense of accomplishment or an emotional payoff in some way. And if you're focused on being a really fantastic leader, a really influential leader in a positive way, then your job is to figure out what's in it for me, for the people that are in your team, so that when you need to find levers to pull on to ensure that they, source that internal motivation to continue with the task at hand, that what things to remind them about that are important to them, so that they can connect with that and remember why they're doing what they do. So thanks so much for the discussion, and any questions or anything that you have that you'd like to shoot through, then make sure you get in touch with us.